Is No More Heroes 2 a good sequel? That's the question that's been on my mind for a while. It guts out a lot of charm from that first game. No more scratching around in dumpsters for cool t-shirts, no more open world to run around in, no more of that special little spice that the first game kept surprising you with. Getting rid of these aspects may have been due to time constraints or other priorities taking precedence, but the end result is a game that tries to do some interesting stuff, and I think that deserves respect. Yes, No More Heroes 2 is a pretty radical departure in some ways, but it's also a pretty awesome time. You can't have a boss fight that's as good as this, and then try to tell me that, actually, this video game is trash. Above all else though, I think No More Heroes 2 really wants you to get angry.
I'll never forget. At night, for the first time in 120 years, snow fell on Center Destroy. It was a sign. Another change, both beautiful and deadly, was coming.
When you see your bro in hell, tell him he's still a dude!
Not in an actual gamer rage kind of way, but in a hell yeah, let's mess up some guys now way. Sequels are really hard to make though. It's tricky to make a video game, but a sequel in particular is its own bundle of issues held down by a heavy weight called expectation. One of the worst things for a really creative game is for it to get so popular and do so well that the newly formed audience clamors for the next thing. That excitement and intrigue for the next thing may force the creators in question to look at what needs fixing or changing to appease past criticisms. Let's also just be very clear about this. All products in a mass media setting are created to make some amount of money. They're also made for artistic purposes. Those things both go hand in hand because artists and makers need money to survive and to keep making cool things. It's when the scale tips too far in the direction of greed that serious problems can arise. And I say this because the punk nature of No More Heroes may conjure up this idea that to make a sequel to it is in defiance of the vibe of the game. And sure, that makes sense if the creators decided to not make another one, but they did. The way I see it, something getting the chance to tell a new story and extend the ideas of that first ideation is an exciting premise because of all the directions it could take, especially a No More Heroes 2. New ideas are really cool. New ideas for those new ideas is also really fucking cool. And being excited for another good meal from your favorite chef is not a disgrace, and it isn't something that I'm saying we should outlaw, even though joy is a crime and the world would rip it out of your hands if you let it. The reality of something succeeding, though, is the eventuality that things will change. Refinement may lead to a birth of new incredible ideas, but it can also result in fatigue, boredom, and a potential loss of identity the longer it goes on. This whole thing is especially tricky for a sequel to No More Heroes. Immediately attracting an audience that loved the game for all of its faults and charm, No More Heroes was special. Couple this with the fact that Desperate Struggle is Grasshopper Manufacture's first proper numbered sequel, and yeah, things have the potential to get a bit weird. There are plenty of sequels out there that do make changes in tone, idea, and gameplay that alienate people. Final Fantasy X-2 is a great example of a game that some people really dislike because of its tonal shift from Final Fantasy X. I don't agree with those people, but I understand why that sentiment exists. On the opposite end of that spectrum, Ninja Gaiden 2 is a sequel that hones in on the identity that its predecessor established. The first level alone feels more chaotic and explosive than anything the first game throws your way, and its speed instantly demands a level of attention. There are elements in Ninja Gaiden Black that I still prefer, with some of that exploration being a nice break from the combat that is really stressful sometimes. But Ninja Gaiden 2's more brutal approach is its own kind of cool thing too. Redirection and refinement are what is to be expected, and either or both can lead to audiences either pulling away entirely or leaning in for a closer look. I especially like when things get upended though. I like when sequels get a chance to do things that there simply wasn't enough time for a developer to fix or implement before that shit had to be shipped. I like when a sequel decides to try something different. Expectation though, that word has a way of making things difficult. Be it the expectations formed through playing something or seeing the reception to it on the wider netscape before you even get a chance to pick up that controller. Devil May Cry 2 makes a lot of mistakes, but also has some genuinely cool stuff in it. It has the reputation of being such a disgraceful waste of human energy and time that most people just completely look over it to get to DMC3, and honestly, yeah, I don't blame you, because Lady is there and Lady is all that matters. There's a lot more that goes into DMC2 than just its problems though. I get it, it's more fun to completely trash on every ounce of its existence than to not do that. But if you have even a shred of imagination or whimsy within you, then you'll see that DMC2 is actually kind of cool as hell. I do get the hate though, with expectations after the first game being so high and it being such a quintessential PS2 franchise starter. It's hard to imagine any game following up on DMC1 and being better or as good as it without some seriously incredible ideas. Like, I don't know, putting Virgil in there somewhere. What I'm trying to say is that I get why DMC2 is disliked, and I know that I run the risk of sounding like a typical YouTube guy telling you that dog shit actually tastes like Skittles. And I mean, you don't know. It could taste like that. I just think that everyone should open their minds a little more and realize that flipping around a level with a shotgun feels very good. Yes, none of this changes the fact that DMC2 is a bit worse than DMC1 in a lot of ways, but constant comparison is kind of annoying and obnoxious. DMC2 looks cool as hell, it absolutely nails the neo-gothic style, and opens up the world of DMC in a way I really like. Plus again, the shotgun is very cool. Another sequel I like to think about a lot is Kingdom Hearts 2, and not just because it's probably the greatest thing ever. Depending on who you ask, Kingdom Hearts 1 had a lot of issues, and that bothered people, and if you ask me, that's weakness. Kingdom Hearts 1 is immaculate, just don't utter the words The Little Mermaid, and we won't have any problems. But Square clearly felt the need to change up a lot of things, and so the level design in 2 was streamlined, combat depth was increased, the pacing of everything was ramped up, and of course, the greatest thing ever was invented: reaction commands. Most people I've known in my life who like Kingdom Hearts massively prefer 2, but there is a section of the audience that actually misses some of the platforming and puzzle aspects of the first game, and that is fascinating to me. Kingdom Hearts 2 is such a radical change-up in so many systemic ways, and that makes it such a fun game to play as a sequel to the first. But because it's so different and fundamentally offers a different kind of mouthfeel, it makes some players yearn for what came before, and that makes sense. While we are talking about all this, it is worth noting what a platform like YouTube does to expectation too. Many will sit and listen to someone's critique or thoughts on a game and take that information in without maybe forming an opinion of their own first. This is a tricky thing to balance as someone that does make videos around opinions as a thinking, feeling human being. I guess my point with all this is that expectations are a thing that affect us all, and in the modern age it's something that we cannot escape from, especially from outside influences. Just make sure to be aware of it from time to time so that you can break free from those chains every now and then and feel the breeze. Some people say that Desperate Struggle is dog shit, a waste of time, bad, and it wasn't directed by Suda, so it may as well not exist. None of these things are true. Well, Suda not directing it's true. That bit is true. Anyway, No More Heroes 2 is not a bad game. It's a very interesting sequel that takes risks, for sure. And some of those may not land in the way you'd hope. Yeah, absolutely. But to completely write it off because of things is silly. Stop being silly. So, is No More Heroes 2 a good sequel? No More Heroes 2 has to pick up the pieces of a story that practically announced that there wouldn't be any follow-up, despite leaving all sorts of insane breadcrumbs that feel like they'd all laugh at you as nothing gets resolved. Imagine that. Laughing breadcrumbs. Frankly, it's kind of an awkward thing to step back into a world that didn't care much about whether it would continue or not. And when you look at Grasshopper's history, yeah, sequels aren't that common. Suitably, No More Heroes 2 doesn't waste a lot of time dwelling on the past. We've killed it, after all, because, you know, kill the past, that's the thing. We did that literally with Jean, so that's all done and dusted, nice and easy. Well, kind of. Travis still has her picture next to his phone, but with the face crossed out. Maybe he can't quite let her go yet. Maybe it's a sign that the last game's journey still left behind some lingering issues and feelings. Or maybe it's as simple as not being able to look into her eyes. It's what No More Heroes does so well, pretend that everything is simple, bullshit fun, but leave a few cracks open to let a player look a little deeper if they so choose. It's perfect for video guys like me to tell you the real meaning of it all so that you don't have to think for yourself. Desperate Struggle is a sort of mess when it comes to all of its ideas though. This is a revenge, romance, introspection on violence, comedy, retro slanted at times action game that tells you killing is bad and that you shouldn't do it while also making it feel like the coolest thing ever. Guess what though? I'm not coming to these games for succinct, clear-cut narratives, and the fact that No More Heroes 2 is even more of a sloppy mess smeared all over my walls is a glowing positive to me. Hell yeah. The point of No More Heroes 2 is following Travis down a deep, dark hole of violent vengeance after his best friend was just killed. We have to feel every bump of that awkward journey, every strange twist and turn, every little permutation that follows on as a result of his actions. And it's because of Travis's inherent bloodlust and desire to be the best that we find him on the path of killing ranked assassins again, with Skelter Helter being the first to go and thus kicking things off with a bang.
Hey, the ultimate vengeance! Hiroshima say.
Travis.
The story gives us a complex thread to follow as we face assassins that idolize the trailblazing path Travis lit behind him. We see reflections of people seeking power, money, fame, infamy, and skill. Almost enough to match Travis beat for beat at times, but never quite enough to finish him off. The power fantasy from the first game is still swinging here for all intents and purposes. It's just that now we're also seeing the consequences of what such a narrow and unfulfilling perspective gains. Killing isn't the only thing Travis can do for the rest of his life if he has any aspirations of becoming something more. Anyway, combat in No More Heroes 2 is seriously incredibly good. It is snappy, smooth, visceral, beautiful, chunky, smooth, a little pulpy at times, and jerking is mandatory. That felt really weird to say. The pacing of combat is seriously so much better here for me as someone that really doesn't mind wailing on guys for about 20 minutes in a parking lot without any music. This is a real part of the game and I think it's very good. We'll get into that later on. The ecstasy gauge is the biggest addition and it is a good one at that. Basically you land attacks and avoid enemies to build up this tiger in the bottom right. Getting it to red will improve Travis's damage output, combo length, and let him switch between high and low attacks with ease mid-combo. It's so smooth, it's beautiful. Or you could build it up until a white outline appears around the tiger and pop a hyperspeed buff that turns Travis into a speed demon going 6,900 miles an hour. Just start mashing attack and watch things melt before you. Ecstasy is a reward for succeeding in a combat encounter and proof that you're doing well in an assassin duel. It's like a style ranking meets a Devil Trigger style system, and it is brilliant and fits No More Heroes 2 so perfectly. I also love that you get to switch between beam katanas on the fly now. Let's be honest though, I am rocking Rose Nasty most of the time, unless I'm low on health because I've been a little bit too silly and need to enter serious mode with Bloodberry. Weapon switching is an entirely optional thing that you can do if you want a different sort of vibe, unlike the first game's upgrades which are basically all linear improvements for the most part. Here the weapons each have their own personality, like Peony that gets erect when you have ecstasy. beautiful. I wouldn't say that No More Heroes 2 innovates on many ideas in the combat, but it doesn't really have to. Everything is fine-tuned to feel better and snappier to do, and that's why it's a shame that there isn't really a challenge that meets this new refinement head-on. Enemies are still tissue paper that Travis cleaves through with next to no issue, just like before, and that sort of frictionless beat-em-up grunt energy is both really cool and also kind of an issue at times. Feeling powerful enough to take down hordes of enemies is always going to feel cool as hell. It's just cool power fantasy bullshit to be able to cleave through a bunch of dudes, you know? And I love it in No More Heroes 2, but sometimes I just wish there was a tougher guy that I had to sweat a little bit for. Now I hear you, that's what the bosses are for. Yes, but there's a problem that occurs when you make every single standard enemy so easy to beat, and it's that it becomes a little boring. Just a little bit. It's a problem because of how simplistic the level design still is as well, where challenges aren't ever going to surprise you because walk down this corridor, kill this group of enemies, carry on, do it again, etc, etc. Travis is supposed to be hot shit in this game. He is supposed to be a Santa Destroy legend back in the flesh. You cannot tell me that there aren't tougher guys that want to show Travis their special little jerk beams too. Alright, those guys do exist, but they're too easy, man. They're too easy. They're too easy. Get tougher guys in here right now. Get them in. Get them in. The lack of difficulty is an issue because it lessens the friction that Travis and the player both have to work through to overcome. Revenge is a bloody path of pain and focus, a path that is only made more enriching if it forces you to reach new heights, whether you like it or not.
Look at you, Travis. Violence is the only way you can express yourself, no?
Oh, I'm in the zone, baby. Nothing's gonna hold me back.
Look at this blood! We humans are alive, even if we are assassins. It doesn't matter if it's a video game, movie, drama, anime, manga, we're alive!
I also love this idea of Travis having to answer for the reputation he worked so hard to build. He was a no-name, nerdy loser weirdo in the first game. Now he's all those things but has a following, and that should mean a lot of people want to smack his goofy little butt. Instead, we have a lot of levels that are basically a lot more of the same thing from before. The thematic points that the game could make through difficulty and Travis needing to work harder than ever to earn his revenge and his place in a world he helped form are not really here. The quirky fun nature of the first game helps excuse a lot of the frictionless elements of the combat for all the reasons that I discussed in that video. But because No More Heroes 2 is so focused on being all about the combat while keeping so many of its core textures unchanged, it ends up feeling like a pretty stale adventure at the worst times. I can't help but still love this game because the bread and butter still tastes so good. I am a simple guy at my core. You let me swing a beam katana at guys holding chainsaws, and I'm sorry, but I will be your biggest fan no matter what. And like I said, I still like how wailing on dudes feel. The bones are strong and feel good to move with. No matter what criticisms I have for the wider game at large, I will never say this combat feels bad because it is sublime. Still though, I just wish No More Heroes 2 took bigger risks in making its scenarios a little more frictional, a little harder, a bit girthier to work my way through, you know? There's no better feeling for me in an action game than getting walled by a guy who's doing shit that God wouldn't sanction in reality, so code had to do it instead. I want to get absolutely stomped on because you give me 10 minutes, a sugar-free monster after a good night's sleep, and there's a decent chance I'll win. I just need prep time. I need that feeling of loss to push me further to want to succeed. I will care a lot more about the combat scenarios you throw at me if at least one encounter in a while makes me think that there's no hope in the future. No More Heroes 2 is still a power fantasy though. It still wants you to tear through enemies and feel that rush of ecstasy propelling you further and further, and I get it. But what about the other side? The open world exploration element that made the first game such a unique blend of things.
I was hoping you'd wander around some more. Explore.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, it's gone. Yeah, the open world is just gone. And I don't hate it. I loved the open world segment before. I thought it truly elevated the whole game because the contrast of badass assassin duels mixed with trash collecting was so funny. But one of the reasons it worked was because of the surprise of that whole dichotomy to begin with. It was a risky move to have half the game be devoted to either menial labor that paid pennies or forcing the player to repeat the same side job over and over again to unlock the cool missions. You can't just do that again though, not without adding something to that idea. If you just repeated verbatim, well done, you did it again, but I've done this exact thing before and it's not funny now. Well, it would be a little bit funny. Alright, Suda, you mad bastard, it'd be hilarious still. God damn it. But it's not surprising. It's not a rug pull to do the same thing again, and as such, the whole economy of the world has changed. Money is no longer a requirement to do the next story mission since Sylvia isn't scamming Travis anymore. Money is still used to buy clothes and the odd beam katana, as well as training up your HP and attack output, but it's no longer a commodity that you're forced to collect and waste. And instead of an open world, we now have a swanky menu to just take you where you need to go. This is the future of video game travel, baby. Don't bother playing the game you paid money for, just hit the button and let the hamsters in the machine do it for you. Now I get it. Gutting the open world is initially a strange move, especially since Suda said it would still be there pre-release only for it to get cut. There was a lot of charm embedded in that open world idea, and since Santa Destroy has been so heavily changed in No More Heroes 2, there would have been a lot of new stuff to see. It would have been really fun, but what if No More Heroes 2 isn't necessarily just about having fun? What if having less wonderful, joyous times in this world makes the rest of the game more effective? If less time is devoted to citywide exploration and more is spent on combat and the story, then surely that has to be a net positive if those things are built up well. Travis is on a blood-fueled mission this time around. He doesn't want to waste a single second on not killing anyone. He doesn't want to have fun because that's not what we're getting out of this anymore. There's also the fact that during this era, open worlds were kind of the main thing going on. GTA clones were rampant, and trust me, I miss this era of thing. I miss when open world schlocky fun was possible. When No More Heroes did an open world, it felt like a fun parody on what other open world games do by having you do sick-ass part-time jobs and drive to the same places over and over again before earning the right to keep playing the fun stuff. That parody still holds up. Hell, it holds up even more in an era where open world games are both rarer in the vein of a GTA-like and way more common in the Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring sort of, here's a gigantic map and 300 hours of your time will be spent here until you forget your job, your friends, your kids, and that's before you start gorging on lore videos on YouTube. The kind of bad open world that felt like it was purposefully trying to waste your time was really fun to engage with. It was fun to play the willing role of the sucker, but No More Heroes 2 doesn't want you to feel like that. It wants you right there alongside Travis, focused, ready to take anything down that stands in your path. It's weird then that the side job minigames are still a thing. They're all fun retro nods except for the scorpion picking one for some reason. I don't know why that's weird. And they are fun. I like almost all of these. Almost all of them except for the Tetris one. That one stresses me out. But if 2 gutted the open world and wanted to redirect the attention of the player to focus solely on the combat and the boss fights, why would you keep any of the side jobs? The answer is, because that's No More Heroes. It needs the menial labor side jobs because without it, then it's not really No More Heroes anymore. I don't like this answer. If the first game was about screwing with the norms of action games and poking fun at open worlds, as well as parodying so many other things, why would the ultra-serious revenge sequel that's trying to be so much more serious keep the biggest wacky element of that previous game? It is a bit confusing to have the ultra-revenge angle play out with a massive uprooting of the previous game's structure to go along with it, only for some elements to remain in kind of an awkward way. At this point, I feel like I'm trying trying to rationalize why the open world is gone in a way that makes sense, but really it was likely cut for lots of little reasons. Ultimately, I have to respect the decision to get rid of it entirely if it simply wasn't working this time. But it's at this point that I feel like I'm seeing a lot of the cracks start to show. It's hard to figure out what should stay, what should go, what is paramount to the identity of that original thing in a sequel, and how much can be changed before the audience bounces off entirely. Desperate struggle makes compromises over where its focuses lie, but the charm of No More Heroes lies in moments where genre and rules are thrown out the window to deliver something unexpected. The side jobs remain not just because they were an element that existed before and must continue on forever, but because it's fun to have them. Not every single element has to slot into the thematic core of the thing. If that was the case, No More Heroes 2 would be one of the most miserable sequels about revenge out there. It'd be cool, but I can see why that sort of direction wasn't where Grasshopper decided to go. Revenge is a very deep and dark subject, though, for good reason. It's a great motivator for an action game, specifically because it provides incredible context for killing things and creating strong core feelings. So ditching the open world and making the wackier elements of No More Heroes completely optional provides focus for this narrative goal. And what does No More Heroes 2 do with that? It's a lot!
Travis, it's kill or be killed.
Now you're feeling it. Get your life losing all meaning.
One of many inspirations for No More Heroes 2, as stated by Suda, is Battles Without Honor and Humanity, Deadly Fight in Hiroshima. It's a part of a wider series of Yakuza-focused action movies that blend reality with fiction by telling an embellished version of real events. The film is not a one-to-one comparison to No More Heroes, and stylistically, there isn't much between them that's all that similar, but Suda said that some of the intense action sequences were inspired by it. And I can see it. There's a chaotic element to the action in the movie that explodes and quickly becomes hard to completely follow. Action isn't super stylish here, it feels real and grounded to the floor as the blood pools at your feet. No More Heroes uses violence as a vehicle for a power fantasy to guide you from boss fight to boss fight. The nature of this process is repetitive, especially in ways that may not entirely be intentional, but that's fine. That repetition is par for the course of any action game. Hell, every video game is made up of repetitive actions that are redefined by reward, challenge, and satisfaction. And in the case of No More Heroes 2, repetition is used to make you go just a little bit stir crazy. Spilling blood is such a basic and common sight that you ultimately become desensitized to it to the point of boredom. An insane thing to say in a game with beam katanas and tiger transformations. I call it the meower up. Nothing is able to give you satisfaction in combat at a certain point because it's all so easy. Bosses are cool, but once the fun is over and you swipe that prompt away, the game is up and it's time to start working towards whoever's next. Killing and winning become part of a routine, and while there is a certain level of gratification there, you'll never really get to a point where enough feels like it's enough anymore. The parking lot fight in the rank 4 stage for Margaret Moonlight is the perfect encapsulation of these feelings, where you spend what feels like an eternity killing guys who keep showing up in groups over and over again. There is no music for this, no extra gimmick at play, you just need to keep killing whoever shows up and tries to get in your way.
Bring it on! Piece of cake!
I've seen many criticisms of this moment for it being kind of weird and out of place, but in a game with one of the greatest soundtracks ever created, do you honestly think that a stage with no music is not intentional in some way? Music is the backbone of No More Heroes 2's whole mood. It provides a backing track that embellishes every moment of the combat system. The soundtrack is frankly the star of the show. It is why you play this game. And that first kick of No More Riot as you leave the elevator in Nathan Copeland's stage is euphoric. No music means you're alone with the sounds of the world around you, a soundscape of persistent death and fighting with nothing to empower you anymore. Nothing is there to make you feel like anything other than a murderer. It's the first real time in both games that Travis feels like he's on an aimless road. Then you get into the mall and hear No More Riot playing again. The song that filled you with so much energy and the desire to go on feels purpose-built to remind you of the rage that set you on the path of revenge to begin with. Once again, you've got that music supporting every swing, every motion. You start to feel like a badass again, like the Travis touchdown we've always wanted to see. But that little crack from before still lingers just that little bit. It was weird, right? Why did we have to sit in near silence and kill hordes of enemies for so long? Then you get to Margaret Moonlight, an assassin whose song is usually the last thing anyone ever hears. Her song for this stage is called Philistine. She sings it to you as you battle, and the point of it is to essentially mock Travis's, and by extension the player's, whole perspective on this experience so far. Suddenly it becomes pretty obvious that music is the whole point of this level. Without it, you feel strange and alone in madness. With it, you feel powerful and righteous again. And through Margaret's song, you're forced to listen to something that tells you just how dumb this whole thing is. Violence and the revenge journey is recontextualized into a selfish and hypocritical one that Travis has always walked along since the very start of the first game, but that hasn't mattered until this moment in time. You may ask, why this is even happening to begin with? Why is it that now Travis has to undergo some level of growth? Well, I think the intention lies somewhere along the way between the player's connection to the game. The meta nature of No More Heroes calls out to you directly many times because you're supposed to feel like a part of this world and its rules. As you ascend the ranks with Travis Touchdown, you're supposed to feel a certain level of pride and joy, I think. Like your weird otaku sex-craving son has just done something important, and then you should probably smile a bit to let him know you acknowledge the achievement. The other side of this meta coin revolves around the success of the first game and the idea that maybe this sequel wants to take that captive audience and lull them into a sense of complacency before putting some new ideas on the plate. I stand by my larger point from that first video of No More Heroes being a game that has depth if you seek it, but really doesn't try to force that upon you. It's a much easier kind of pseudo game to digest in that way, but that simplicity is what likely got such a solid audience to begin with. That simplicity is what makes No More Heroes work. It's also what draws you in to look deeper and make connections and points that otherwise aren't that important to the core narrative. Desperate Struggle uses that simplistic appeal of the first game along with the player's connection to Travis to try and tell a story about breaking free from a cycle of conflict and look forward to something a little better. It's an evolution of the violent bloodlust at the core of the first game disguised by funny jokes and purposely time-wasting gameplay. It's a continuation of the ideas that were hinted at and now have a chance to finally bloom into something meaningful. The problem is that these ideas aren't exactly consistent, or rather, they aren't treated as a super solid backbone for the rest of the game to lean on. There are moments of character growth for Travis and Sylvia, and they're incredible to witness. but there's a struggle to keep the same level of energy and witticisms throughout. There are plenty of scenes that showcase genuine depth between the two, but there are also lots of moments that fall back on the relationship they had in the previous game. Their growth towards each other doesn't feel like a consistent element, and I think that's a wider problem for the whole game. Ideas don't feel super cohesive because there's plenty of dead air between those important moments. The parking lot segment is such an outlier for people because it's the one time the game does try to do something to get your attention about what's really going on here. It's the only time you can latch on to the real point of No More Heroes 2. And if you don't latch on in this moment, if you don't connect with the rather abrupt change in nature for Travis, then the rest of the experience might not work either. It'll operate as a strange facsimile of the first game without 100% of that fun charm you loved it so much for. I cannot tell you how hard it has been to write this video and to think about all of No More Heroes 2 and its ideas and goals and broader points because it feels so messy. It is such a super strange and weird thing to try and break down. I have no idea how I really feel about No More Heroes 2. Sometimes I love it to death, and other times I want to beat it to death. It feels like it gets so close to making a point before completely retracting and rushing all the way to an ending that doesn't feel 100% earned. I'm a sucker for growth in my stories. I love when characters are able to grow beyond the framework of the narrative and look onward to what comes next. That is what Travis's journey in desperate struggle is really about. His ascent to number 1 in the first game was about proving that he is the best to a world that didn't care either way. In 2, his rise to number 1 is emblematic of climbing a ladder of corpses and being the first to see the light. So what is No More Heroes 2 trying to say? I honestly don't know. I know YouTube videos are meant to hold all the answers to life's problems, and all that, but yeah, I got no idea. There's the obvious points about looking beyond and trying to build a better future for yourself, seeking connection with those around you, and forming love with someone that you've had feelings for forever but been too scared to really admit that to. One of the directional touches I love has to do with eyes. And in the peep show scenes throughout the story, he can't bear to simply look Sylvia in the eyes. At first, it seems like a funny hee-hee-ha-ha gag that we're forced to ogle Sylvia as Travis's sex-craving brain has its priorities clearly. But then the idea starts to form that maybe he uses these simplistic desires as a shield for not knowing how to get something else. Wrestling was always a guiding star for Travis when he needed it before. It was always there to give him strength and wisdom before the hardest battles. He still keeps the masks he collected from the first game in his motel room if you have a save file to carry over. But that same wisdom is nowhere to be found now. Those letters you used to get that pushed you forward aren't here anymore. Wrestling is still a joy for Travis, but it isn't enough to guide him onto a set path now. I think the point with all this is to say that conflict and violence are a necessity up to a certain point. You have to fight tooth and nail to get somewhere in life sometimes. You have to fight back against anyone who will deny your existence and your will to keep moving forward. Kill after kill. Travis works toward building his reputation, but once that's earned, it's proved to be worth nothing on its own. That power he attained isn't being used to do anything but elongate his suffering. No More Heroes 1 and 2 are both power fantasies, but the sequel focuses way more on this idea that being a power fantasy isn't enough. There's a real point to be made that the mechanical plateau in desperate struggle represents a ceiling of growth. You cannot attain any more power at this point. You are as skilled in combat as you will ever be. You have to look elsewhere to gain more power and, more importantly, purpose. That is the major driving force behind No More Heroes 2 as I see it. It's what all the peep show scenes are leading up to by the end. That very last moment where Travis places his hand on the glass, looks Sylvia in the eyes, and says it's time to come home is what we've been waiting for. That's all well and good. I love this ending, but there's a whole game besides this, and like I said, there's a consistency problem here. These ideas only really start forming towards the end of the story, and that makes it tough to really be satisfied with. If there's another point to be made here about violence and criticizing its nature in video games and wider media, then I wouldn't say it does a very good job at doing that, if it's trying to do that at all, which I don't think it is. Killing is ultimately just a vehicle for a story about a destructive act that leads nowhere, about goals rooted in taking away lives without building one of your own that has a future. But there's a lot of stories about that exact idea, and No More Heroes 2 doesn't necessarily have much to say about it in its own way. I think a lot of the messaging is actually baked in between the lines in No More Heroes 2. It's set in the tone and the color and the mood of various scenes. It's the fact that the majority of the game is still light and funny and kind of insane, while having those moments that surprise you with how honest and vulnerable they feel. It's the silence those moments leave when they're gone that matter. It's the spaces in between the tonal shifts that create a feeling of change, of your eyes opening up the path ahead of you before the white noise drowns out all thought again. Every waking moment Travis spends is set on his revenge, and it's not until he finally gets it that we once again go on a bike ride through the streets. Our eyes are open again, vengeance has been acquired, and things can go back to normal, right? Well, no, things aren't ever going back to normal, but that's okay too. Change is a necessary part of life, and learning things about ourselves and questioning who we are is good. It's healthy, it's necessary. No More Heroes 2 wants you to get angry because that's what you're supposed to do when the illusion of your power fantasy falls apart. Your safety is questioned, the routine is upended, the world feels different now. What other way is there to express this discomfort than with rage? But you need to look ahead too. It's okay that you got angry, but you have to look to the future and figure out what comes next. This might go down in history as the game I am most historically conflicted with, and trying to reach a proper conclusion it's really hard for me here, okay? So I'll just say this. No More Heroes 2 is a really cool sequel with good ideas and decent execution. Expectation is the killer that a lot of sequels are scared to reckon with, but I think Desperate Struggle succeeds in standing on its own ideas and focusing on certain things. I really wish that combat felt more purposeful in its additions as opposed to just tightened up to feel great but not additive to the wider point at large. I think difficulty would have given greater purpose to a lot of the fighting as Travis claws his way out of a world that he doesn't want to be a part of anymore. Revenge is such a potent idea for a story like this, but I wish the game could have gone a lot harder with it, been more painful about it, and ultimately depart from the tone of the first game a lot more to really relish in those harsher feelings. I think that is maybe the core of the dissonance. Revenge feels more like an aesthetic that No More Heroes 2 is wearing as a means to get to an emotive end, as opposed to vengeance festering in the narrative and leading to more interesting outcomes. I like No More Heroes 2 quite a bit. I wish a lot was different.
Thank you to the supporters and those who come after.